These projections don't align with the market data. We need to renegotiate the terms immediately.
We understand, but these are the agreed-upon deliverables. We can't shift the goalposts now.
The rain began before sunset, tapping against the glass walls of the 22nd floor office like fingers desperate to be heard. By the time everyone had gone home, the city below had dissolved into a blur of headlights and silver streets. That was when she stepped out of the CEO's office, pale, trembling, and with tears she was trying far too hard to hide. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words hit him like thunder. "Take me home, or you're fired." For a poor single father who had spent years surviving one heartbreak after another, Amir had no idea that this single moment was about to change his life forever. Before the story begins, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected love, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world and helps bring more emotional stories like this to life. Amir had never imagined his life would become what it was. At 32, he lived in a small rented apartment on the edge of the city, where the paint peeled from the walls and the roof leaked every monsoon season. Every morning before sunrise, he would wake to the soft sound of his 6-year-old daughter, Meher, breathing beside him. She was the only peaceful thing left in his world. After losing his wife, Sana, to a sudden illness 3 years earlier, Amir's life had turned into a daily battle between grief and responsibility. There was no time to fall apart. Meher needed breakfast, school uniforms, combed hair, and bedtime stories. She needed laughter. She needed a father who could smile even when his own heart felt shattered. He worked as a personal driver and office assistant for one of the city's most powerful companies, owned by the brilliant and intimidating CEO, Zara Malik. Everyone in the building feared her. She was known for sharp decisions, impossible standards, and a coldness that made even senior executives nervous. Rumors about her spread like wildfire through the office halls. Some called her heartless. Others said she had built her empire alone after being betrayed by the people closest to her. Amir never cared much for gossip. To him, she was simply his boss, a distant woman in elegant suits who rarely looked at anyone long enough to truly see them. That rainy evening, when Zara whispered those desperate words, Amir froze. He looked at her and noticed what no one else ever had. Her mascara had smudged slightly beneath her eyes. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. The woman who commanded boardrooms and billion-rupee deals looked suddenly fragile, almost lost. He should have been angry at the harshness of what she said, but something in her face told him this wasn't arrogance. This was fear. Without another word, Amir picked up his keys and led her toward the underground parking lot. The elevator ride felt endless. Zara leaned silently against the mirrored wall, staring at her reflection as if she didn't recognize herself. Amir wanted to ask if she was all right, but the silence around her felt sacred, like touching a wound that was still bleeding. As the car pulled into the stormy night, the city lights reflected across the windshield in broken lines. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Amir noticed that instead of giving him the address of her luxurious penthouse, she directed him toward the older side of the city, where narrow streets twisted between aging houses and fading memories. When they finally stopped in front of a modest home, Zara sat still, unable to move. Only then did Amir realize what had happened. The house belonged to her mother. Earlier that evening, Zara had received news that her mother had suffered a severe collapse and had been rushed home from the hospital. But Zara had been trapped in a brutal emergency meeting with investors threatening to pull out millions. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO had found herself completely helpless, unable to leave, unable to show weakness, unable to be a daughter instead of a leader. Amir stepped out first and opened the gate as rain soaked through his shirt. Zara followed, her heels sinking into the wet ground. Inside, the house smelled faintly of medicine and old books. Her mother lay asleep in bed, weak but stable, under the care of a nurse. The moment Zara saw her, the wall around her cracked. She sank beside the bed and wept silently. Amir stood at the doorway, unsure if he should leave, but Zara's mother opened her eyes and looked toward him with a tired smile. She thanked him in a whisper for bringing her daughter home. That night changed something. Over the following weeks, Amir began noticing small shifts in Zara. She no longer passed through the office like a storm. Sometimes she paused to ask about Meher. Sometimes she stayed late and, through the glass walls of her office, Amir would catch her staring out at the city with an expression full of exhaustion. One evening, when Amir was preparing to leave, Zara stopped him. She had seen the small drawing taped inside his locker, a crayon picture of a man holding a little girl's hand under a bright yellow sun. "That's my daughter," he said softly. Something in Zara's eyes softened. From then on, their worlds slowly began to overlap. Zara started asking Amir to stay after office hours, not for work, but for conversation. She would sit across from him in the quiet break room, coffee growing cold between them, and ask about life as a single parent. Amir spoke of sleepless nights when Meher had fevers, of school fees he struggled to pay, of the ache of returning home to silence after putting his daughter to bed. For the first time in years, someone truly listened. And for the first time, Amir began to see the loneliness behind Zara's Her mother's health was failing, and the men who had once claimed to love her had only wanted her wealth and status. One rainy Sunday, Meher fell sick while Amir was at work. Panic rushed through him when the school called. He was ready to beg for leave, expecting the usual corporate coldness. Instead, Zara handed him her own car keys and told him to go. When Amir returned the next day, exhausted from a night at the hospital, he found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a check covering Meher's medical expenses. There was no note. No signature. But he knew. That silent act of kindness touched him in ways words never could. Slowly, the bitterness Amir had carried since losing his wife began to ease. He still missed Sana every day, but life no longer felt like endless darkness. Zara's quiet presence had become something steady in his world. Then came the night everything changed again. The company was on the verge of collapse. A trusted business partner had betrayed Zara, leaking confidential plans and driving the stock into chaos. News channels flashed her face across every screen, painting her as a failed leader. The office turned into a battlefield of fear. Employees whispered about layoffs. Amir watched as Zara carried the weight of an empire alone. For 3 nights straight, she barely left her office. On the 4th night, Amir found her sitting on the floor beside her desk, shoes off, eyes red from exhaustion. For the first time, she looked not like a CEO, but simply a woman drowning under the pressure of holding everything together. Amir sat beside her. No grand speeches. No empty promises. Just quiet company. And sometimes, that is what saves a person. He reminded her that storms always pass. He reminded her that the people who truly matter stay. He reminded her that losing everything on paper is not the same as losing yourself. Those words stayed with Zara. With Amir's encouragement, she fought back. She exposed the betrayal, rebuilt investor trust, and saved the company from ruin. But more importantly, she saved herself. Months passed. Life slowly changed for Amir too. Zara arranged for Meher to be admitted into one of the city's best schools under a scholarship program she personally funded. She also promoted Amir to operations manager after recognizing his intelligence, honesty, and ability to handle crises calmly. For the first time in years, Amir could breathe. No more choosing between rent and groceries. No more nights wondering if tomorrow would break him. One evening, Zara visited Amir's small apartment to drop off documents. Meher opened the door first and immediately wrapped her arms around Zara's legs. Children, after all, can sense kindness faster than adults ever can. The sight of Zara sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Meher color a picture book, stayed with Amir's heart. In that moment, he saw not the feared CEO, but a woman capable of immense tenderness. Their bond deepened quietly. No dramatic confessions. No rushed romance. Just two wounded souls learning how to trust again. Amir began noticing the way Zara smiled when Meher laughed. The way her eyes lingered on their simple life with something almost like longing. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. Then came the truth Zara had hidden. The night she had whispered for him to take her home, it hadn't only been about her mother. She had been on the verge of breaking. For months, she had been suffering silently under unbearable pressure, panic attacks, and loneliness so deep it frightened her. She had whispered those desperate words not as an order, but as a cry for help from someone who no longer knew how to ask gently. Amir didn't judge her. Because he understood what it meant to carry pain in silence. A year later, the same city that once watched them as boss and employee now saw something entirely different. At the company's annual gala, Zara stood on stage before hundreds of guests. Instead of speaking about profits or expansion, she spoke about resilience. About the people who enter your life when you are at your lowest. About the kindness that saves hearts. Then, in front of everyone, she called Amir and Meher onto the stage. Her voice trembled as she thanked the man who had not only taken her home that night, but had brought her back to herself. Tears filled Amir's eyes. Because sometimes love does not arrive as fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet hand reaching toward your broken life. Months later, Zara made a decision that shocked the entire city. She stepped down from her role as CEO and appointed a new leadership team, choosing instead to focus on building a charitable foundation dedicated to single parents, widows, and children struggling with education and healthcare. Amir stood beside her through every step. Together, they built something far greater than wealth. They built hope. Meher, once a quiet little girl missing her mother, began to bloom again. Her laughter filled rooms. Her drawings became brighter. In every picture she drew now, there were always three people under the sun. One evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and orange, Amir stood on the balcony of their new home, simple, warm, and full of life. He looked at Zara beside him. Neither of them had been searching for love. They had only been trying to survive. But sometimes, life hides its greatest blessings inside its most painful moments. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel and help these emotional stories reach more hearts around the world. And before the story ends, leave a comment below and tell us, from which country are you watching our stories? We would love to know where our family of viewers is watching from. In the end, Amir understood something beautiful. The night his CEO whispered, "Take me home or you're fired," he thought it was the worst moment of his life. He had no idea it was actually the beginning of everything he had prayed for. Sometimes the people who seem strongest are the ones silently begging to be saved. And sometimes the ones with the least to give end up changing someone's life the most. That is the power of kindness.